We're going to talk about caregivers and especially with Alzheimer's patients and family members. Joining us today, the Director of Community Engagement at LCC, Father David Ross, and thanks for joining us, Father.
Good to see you, Holly. Thank you for inviting me.
Okay, so what brought this up in your mind? I know there was a community forum from the Alzheimer's Association, and you're worried about the caregivers, and sometimes they don't take good enough care of themselves.
Absolutely. There was a recently written a book. Daisha Kuiper wrote a book entitled Travelers to Unimaginable Lands. And I found it interesting. I read the review in the Wall Street Journal. I haven't read the book yet. But there are 55 million people in the world who suffer from dementia. 6.7 million have Alzheimer's in the United States. I was attracted to this book only because my own father suffered from Alzheimer's and my grandfather suffered from Alzheimer's. And as I began to look at it, most people spend their time talking about the patient rather than the caregiver. And it's really difficult if you're a caregiver, as most people would know who have parents or relatives who are suffering from dementia or Alzheimer's. And I found this book interesting because the author spends a significant amount of time trying to allay the fears of caregivers. I remember when my father had Alzheimer's, when he was around, I had to take his car away from him. One day we're driving down Metcalf Street. He said, "I can drive." I said, "You really, Dad?" He said, "Of course I can drive." So we got in his car and we're going south on Metcalf Street from where he lived. And he's looking at all the houses and going left to center all the time. So I said, "Dad, let's pull over in the St. Rose parking lot." And we did. And I pulled those keys right out of the ignition and said, "Dad, we're going to go back home now." And I took Dad home and I started driving with his car, taking it away. And he screams out, "Where are you going with my car?" And I said, "Dad, I'm going to take it to get the oil changed." He said, "You've had the oil changed for the last 5 days in a row. It doesn't need changing anymore." So he'll have these moments of lucidity. I had feelings of guilt, some shame, as a matter of fact. So what happens is, I think what we have to do as caregivers or with caregivers is give them permission to forgive themselves. Because oftentimes we expect the patient, the person with Alzheimer's, to be just as lucid as we are at times, and sometimes there are these moments of lucidity, but oftentimes we expect that person to be just as we are, and we get angry when the person doesn't respond in the manner in which the person did in the past. I don't understand Alzheimer's all that much, but I do understand what it means to be a caregiver. Some years ago, there was a book written entitled The 36-Hour Day. It's by Nancy Mace and Peter Rabins. It's a phenomenal book. Millions of copies have been sold. I'd recommend that to anybody who has to care for a patient, an Alzheimer's patient. It's a marvelous book, and it gives you some very down-to-earth advice about what you can do when you live with somebody or care for somebody who's got Alzheimer's.
Right, yeah, it is a difficult situation being a caretaker for anyone, and Alzheimer's is just one of those diseases, man, that, they keep working for a cure, but it's difficult until then.
I understand now there's a Japanese company that has a pharmaceutical company that's manufacturing some sort of drug that's going to assist, but it's not going to be a cure. There is no cure yet. I remember back in '92, I was with my parents in Florida. They were there for the winter, and I went down to visit them, and I heard some promising stories back in '92 about a cure for Alzheimer's, and it never proved to be the case. So I just keep trying to be as responsible as I possibly can when I deal with persons who've got Alzheimer's, to try to be as caring as possible, right, without succumbing to feelings of guilt and shame.
Right. Yeah, that's a key point. Don't feel guilty and shame. You got to take care of yourself too when you're taking care of others.
Most people don't understand that. They think they have to be with the person all day. Luckily, I was able to have some free time, because one of my friends came and took care of my father after my mother passed, and so I was able to be able to go and visit with Dad and spend time with Dad, but then I would leave, and I can only imagine what she had to go through as she took care of my father. She would tell me on occasion how difficult it was, but she loved it,
Right,
he tried to do the same routines that they did when he was lucid all the time, but it's difficult.
Certainly is. It's a really good issue that you brought up, Father. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Holly. Have a good day.
All right, you too. All right, don't go away. Need Edition continues in a moment.